Okay, we're live.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the decision days of me. I'm Nick Adams-King, and I'm the lead member for Universal Services, as well as my colleague Russell Oppenheimer, who's the executive member for Countryside and Regulatory Services. These decision days are being broadcast in one session live on YouTube via the County Council website. I'd like to welcome as well Councillor Tim Groves, who's the opposition spokesman for the Liberal Democrats, and Councillor Louise Parker-Jones for the Independent Group, and also to Councillor Brad Baines, who's here in his capacity as a divisional member for one of the decisions we're making. There are no deputations at the decision day. There are no deputations at my decision day today. So without any further ado, let's go to the first item. And that one's bus contracts for Alton and Winchester. So that would be Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Councillor Adams-King. Is Mike presenting this one today?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Mike.
That's okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval to award new local bus contracts in the Alton and Winchester area to start on August the 1st, and these will be for a period of 4 years. There will be an option to extend into the 5th and 6th year if it's deemed necessary. They are existing contracts with 5 contracts for the Alton and 4 contracts for the Winchester area. Until now, these contracts have not been re-tendered due to the pandemic and the uncertainty of the market at the time. In particular, the driver shortage that hit the operators nationally quite hard. There was a strong possibility that we would have seen less competitive costs, if any at all. The local bus market is recovering at a steady pace, and within the team, we've produced a tendering plan to move forward and get these contracts now re-tendered. This means that all the contracts that have been subject to single tender agreements during the pandemic will now be re-tendered at regular intervals, as we can now return to more business as usual practices. These contracts have been tendered and the costings are included within the report. The Service 67, if approved today, will see the final journeys Monday to Saturday at 10 to 6 departing from Winchester, and the Saturday morning first journey curtailed from Westmead-on-Hutt. This is likely to raise some interest from passengers, as the journeys will no longer continue through to Petersfield. When this report was produced, I contacted Councillor Oppenheimer and Councillor McCarter, as their divisions would be impacted by these changes. Councillor Oppenheimer wished not to add any comments to the date. And to date, Councillor McCarter had not come back to me with any feedback. This is happening around the country. We're seeing tendered prices coming back much higher than existing contract values. Through this tendering process, we have seen a £45,000 increase in costs, even with the reduction of the 67 service. So to address this, we are proposing to award these contracts to ensure these services, ensure continuity, and then review them after around 6 months. This review will be undertaken with a view to making service reductions to bring the contract costs back in line with the budget. And the increased cost of these budgets for the last 6-month period will be met through a combination of existing government grant and temporary underspends elsewhere in the local bus budget. Going forward, we're going to see a number of different tendering processes to attempt to avoid this situation happening again. It is clear that as we move forward through the tendering process around the county, we are going to be able to afford to buy less service with our existing budget. Thank you.
Super, thanks very much, Mike. So I've got Tim and then Louise who'd like to speak. Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, for that presentation, and thank you also for including me in the decision day this afternoon. There are concerns about the 67 service that I've had, which you implied there might be, Mike. So that is true. I've had some. There are a couple of questions that I'd like to sort of ask, and perhaps you could clarify. There seems to be a problem with the timetable relating to access to Peter Symonds College. Have you considered this? And if so, what is the solution? And if not, why? And what might you do about it in the future? Also, another concern about limited access for shoppers, wishing to access shops. And I think you referred to the termination of the last journey at Westmeon-Hutt. What are the reasons for this, and can it be changed? Is it just an operational issue for the bus company rather than convenience for the bus users? I think it's a suggestion. It might make it easier for the drivers, but not for the passengers. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay. So if I just talk about the curtailment then from the Westmeon-Hutt, it's a combination of two things. One of that was engaging with the bus operator who currently does that contract, and that is Stagecoach. And we were obviously, we were expecting to see this contract return exceedingly higher than it currently is, and that's due to the low numbers in passenger usage. So to work that, we've looked at how we can make potential options to make savings, and of that there were two options that we tendered at the time. One was for the existing contract, and then the other was for a slight curtailment that we've now got here, which is the option 2, and that's what's come back as the cheaper option. I say the cheaper option, that's still over budget slightly, and that's what's taken us into the overspend on this particular contract. In terms of the college students, there's no real change to the timings, and Stagecoach, who currently operate that, have given us the feedback, and they don't see that there's a need to change those times. So as far as it goes, those times will continue as they are, and they should fit with the college students.
Just to add on to that, I think that the reason there's maybe less flexibility for college, as Mike says, there's no proposed changes to the timetable, but the 67 is used by a lot of entitled home to school transport students. So the timetable in the mornings and the afternoons is very much geared around those students who are entitled to free school transport, and that's fixed. It's a fixed point in time. And so the transfer onto Peter Symonds, which isn't a statutory responsibility of the county council, has to fit around that timings.
Does that make sense, Tim?
Yeah, well, that's right. Thank you very much for those answers, both Mike and Lisa. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
You're welcome.
Louise.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Mike, for your presentation. My questions really are about the longevity of service going forward, because I'm really pleased to see that you've managed to tender, and I know it's been really difficult, and I appreciate the costs have risen. What I really want to know is, looking at the future implications of this, are the county council going to look at it in a holistic way in respect of what are the knock-on implications? For example, if you are running fewer services, how many people will revert to owning cars perhaps, which increases traffic, increases congestion, and often, because people often use buses, etc., and public transport because their income is lower. These aren't nice, shiny new hybrids or electric cars. They are the more polluting cars, unfortunately. And it builds up all these sort of unintended consequences. It breaks down opportunities to see families and friends, and people's mental health suffers, and they can't access doctors. It's like a little tower that just sort of crumbles away when some of these social networks disappear. So I think it's a bit of reassurance, given that in 6 months we know there's going to be a lot more coming forward, and that one of our biggest options seems to be just to reduce the level of service, which I don't think sets us up well for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, if you don't mind me coming in there, I think you raised a really important point. I think that's absolutely something we need to take into consideration. And our qualities impact assessment with each decision day paper that comes forward will have to reference those exact points of the knock-on effects to other county council departments, the knock-on effects to people, particularly those, as you have highlighted, who are living in poverty at the moment. I think that that going forward, we are going to see higher tender prices, as Mike said, across the county, as we are indeed across the country with my colleagues in various other authorities. I think what we need to do is work very closely with our community transport operators, so that where local bus can't pick up the slack, if there's room in the community transport sector, or if there's a service that we can promote more within that group of people who are impacted, we'll look to do that. And our priority and the team's priority will be to purchase as much service provision as we can within the budget available going forward to try and reduce those impacts and those mitigations. And any work that we can do on the strategic side of the authority with our colleagues over in the Hampshire 2050 Directorate in improving infrastructure and growing patronage through strategy-based solutions, I think will have a positive knock-on impact to bus operations in Hampshire, and therefore in the longer term lower the tender prices, or not lower them necessarily, but make providing bus services in Hampshire more competitive and more profitable for the bus operators. Therefore, they'd be willing to take more chances, take more risks, and run more services into the predominantly rural areas that will be impacted by our service reductions, where tenders have come back so much higher than the available budget.
Super, thanks, Lisa. Louise, I can give you sort of a bit of a political perspective as well. I mean, obviously, we're working within a landscape where things are beginning to get back to normal after the pandemic, and bus use is becoming more normal, and that also allows us to begin to do those tenders, as Lisa and Mike have talked about. But equally, we're looking at a very different landscape in terms of the availability of bus drivers and the cost of running services, and that must, at the end of the day, have an impact upon us. But one thing that we are going to do, and Hilary and I have been talking about a campaign to really encourage people with comms to use the bus services over the summer, because it is really a use it or lose it situation for us all. And we need to get that message. All of us have a responsibility to get that message out to the people we serve, because if we can get people to use buses, it's good for the environment, it's good for connectivity, but obviously the more people that use it, the easier it is for us to justify the investment that we put within them, and the greater benefit it is, as you rightly described, for everybody. And it is a matter of looking at as best we can with that holistic view. But even so, understanding that we have a budget that is constrained at the end of the day. So, is that okay?
Yes, it's more to be cognizant of it going forward. And as
Absolutely.
you said, we all have our part to play in that. But I think, the rest of the county council has to be aware that it may face additional burden on its services and service requests because of something simple like a bus no longer being there. That was thank you.
Yeah, I think that's point well made and understood. Russell, did you want to say anything?
Just briefly, as one of the local members, I'd like to say I really appreciate the care and thought that has gone into this from Mike and Lisa. It's a good report, and it's a tricky situation. And whilst, as a local councillor, I regret on behalf of my residents the slight reduction in service, the early morning and the late afternoon service going through Petersfield, I understand totally why it's happening. And I think, as you said, Nick, we have to live within our means. We have to manage the budgetary situation. And like you, I also hope passenger numbers recover. I think we're doing everything we can to support services in this post-pandemic period, in the hope that they will recover. And I think we're doing our best. We're doing everything we can to try and encourage people to use the buses, and I'll certainly do that locally. Thanks.
Super, thanks. Any other comments anyone would like to make? No, all good. So thanks. Oh, sorry, Tim. Oh, you're muted, Tim. Sorry. No, you're Tim. We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry.
Yeah, start again.
It's probably best that I start again anyway. Thank you. Just to, I wonder if I think in the report you say there is flexibility in this and that you will improve things as time goes on. Can you confirm whether that is the case and perhaps how you go about it?
I think we'll look at where the patronage is and where the patronage isn't on the service, and we'll look to improve what we can within the available budget. I mean, it's important that we serve the patronage trends that exist, and that any new that come along, once we see growth, which I think will come from as a result of our advertising campaign that Councillor Adams-King's referred to. But in terms of improving, it would be improving, but within the available budget. So it's unlikely we'd see more service, but what we'd look to do is make sure the service we are buying is serving the highest number of people we can.
Thank you very much.
Okay. If everyone's happy, I'm very happy to confirm that decision. Thanks so much, Mike and Lisa. We've got another bus issue next. Sorry, Patrick, I should have asked you to introduce it to begin with first. I'm sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine, Councillor Adams-King. Well, this one I'm going to hand over to Lisa again to take us through this paper. But this is really the delay of an implementation of a previously agreed savings proposal, which really affords some time for the community ourselves to look at options for that. But I'll pass over to Lisa, Councillor, and she can take us through that.
Lovely, thank you, everyone. Okay, so as Patrick set out, this report recommends the delay of the implementation of 2 of our savings, which were related to our savings plan to 2023. The cost of delaying these 2 savings implementations is about £32,000, and that will be funded through our local transport fund, which is a government grant aimed at supporting bus services that's been in place since the outset of the pandemic. So why we'd like to delay the implementation of these particular 2 services? Firstly, it's to afford us more time to undertake further consultation with our stakeholders, in particular the parishes down in the forest, about what the best solution looks like for them that is also affordable for within our budget. We've been meeting with them regularly anyway, but the last time we met, there may be a possibility of some additional funding from parishes to put into the service. Not huge sums, but it does change what we can and can't afford to provide. And secondly, in particular with the Andover area, it's to ensure that we replace the services with the most appropriate replacement, given the high number of passengers who travel with wheelchairs in that area. We want to ensure that whatever service we put in place meets the existing demand from those users with wheelchairs who have very little alternative options. And so that's important to us to achieve. And wheelchair accessible transport is always more, it takes longer to procure and to provide, purely because you've got a smaller pool of operators who have got the availability to provide that. And so both proposed delays, give us the time to ensure that the best solution for the communities is implemented while staying within our reduced budget as a result of the savings plan to 2023.
Super, thanks, Lisa. Tim.
Quick question, Lisa. Is September the best time to start this sort of service, or would it be better to start it before the summer? What are the advantages and disadvantages of doing such?
I think that most bus operators prefer to implement service changes in September, purely because that's when they naturally change their timetables in the wider area to reflect the new school year. So rather than doing lots of incremental changes around their network, they prefer to do kind of one lot of changes. They find that works better in terms of how they can get the messaging out to passengers. So that's why September has been chosen, that it operationally makes the most sense.
Thank you. Do you expect more patronage in the summer months or less?
The peak month for bus travel is November, the bit pre-Christmas. So as long as we get the correct level of service ready for November, I'd be happy. But in places like the forest, of course, you do see a peak in the summer with tourism too.
Thank you very much.
I think it's fair to say though, Lisa, that the bit of the forest that we're talking about, Tim, with this service, it serves very much a local community. It's not really
very
one
rural.
that would. It's very rural. It's also not really, although of course it's a holiday area. It's not a service that looks to a visitor base at all. It's very much based upon the local communities in those villages that are affected by it. So
absolutely,
it's not really a kind of a holiday service at all in any way.
No.
Louise.
I just wanted to say how pleased I am actually that this has come forward and more consideration is going to be given ensuring that these services can be retained in some form. And I think that's absolutely brilliant and it's an excellent use of the money. So I just wanted to say that I really support this actually and got no concerns other than I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that it all works out for everybody, whether you're in Andover or whether you're in Lymington. You know, I think it's a great thing to be able to at least try to make this work. So yeah, I'm really supportive.
Super, thanks. Russell, would you like to add anything?
No, I don't have anything to add to this one.
No, all good. So I have to say, I'm obviously the Andover area for me is one that is sort of about which I know a little bit more, and I'm really pleased that we're taking some time to look at the service that particularly impacts those in Enum Alamein.
Yeah.
And the Enum Trust, the people who are part of the Enum Trust. This is a vital service for them to get into Andover, and ensuring that we still have something that is appropriate for them and get that right is the important thing. It also gives us a chance as well to work with parishes and potentially with community transport providers in both places to see what we can do to provide a better service, and hopefully, you never know, it might begin to give us a bit of a template for what we can do elsewhere. So best to spend a bit of time, and although it costs us a little bit of money, we've got some money set aside to do it and to make sure we get it right. So I'm very happy to agree that, if that's okay. Should we move on to the next one? Thanks so much, Lisa, for that.
Thank you.
So Patrick again, and we're going to look at the project appraisal for Cycles in Eastleigh Town Centre. Tim will no doubt be interested in this.
Thank you, Councillor Adams-King. You say it's a Transforming Cities Fund scheme. It's a project appraisal update on budget and delivery of that. I've got Ben Smith, supported by Maisie Burrows, who's going to take us through it. There was just one point I was going to make is when reading the paper, when we talk about the implementation, the budget side of things, what's really important, I think, that comes out is that it still represents value for money for what we're trying to achieve on the schemes as well. But if I ask Ben and Maisie to take us through the paper, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I'll introduce the paper, and then if there's more detailed questions about the scheme itself, Maisie can help out after that, hopefully. So the report we got, as you said, is about the cycle improvements in the Eastleigh area around the town centre. It is part of the Southampton Transforming Cities Fund, which is a series of projects around encouraging walking, cycling and supporting public transport use. And it did come to the executive member back in early 2022 for approval and was approved at that point. However, since then, we've done further work on the design. The scope has increased slightly, and the marketplace in terms of costs, as we're all well aware of, has gone up. So unfortunately, the cost of the project has gone up, hence bringing this report back to this decision day, seeking approval for the increased cost for what is largely the same scheme that was approved previously, albeit with some sort of minor changes to the scope that's happened in the interim. There is a funding sort of package that's set out in the finance section of the report, which shows where the additional funding is coming from. And as Patrick said, the other point I just wanted to say was that, rather than just trying to find money continually as costs increase, we have gone back and just, looked hard at whether it is still value for money and it is still a scheme that's worthwhile to deliver. In our opinion, and as set out in the report, it's very much worthwhile to continue with the project, even at a higher cost. It is part of a bigger package, as I said, across the Southampton area, and it sort of fully aligns with what the county is trying to do in terms of active travel and supporting public transport youth. So we did just do that sort of sense check rather than just saying that we just need to find some additional funds for it. So that's really what the report is setting out. Subject to approval, we're ready to start work fairly quickly as well in the next few weeks. So hopefully, if it is approved, we can then continue deliver the benefits on the ground and deliver the project. So I'll leave it there, and if there's any detailed points, as I said, Maisie will be very happy, I'm sure, to help out.
Super, thanks very much, Ben. I'm sorry, I should have said both of you, Louise and Tim, both be very interested in it, as you're both Eastleigh members. Tim, would you like to go first?
Yeah, yes, just to say I'm very pleased to see that, if this is approved, that you should be able to get going this month. That's very encouraging, and I'd definitely like to see the scheme taking place. So thank you very much for pursuing it and making that happen. I might have a couple of comments on the detail, but these are just personal ones, but I'll speak to either Maisie or Ben outside the meeting if that's all right. Thank you.
That's fine. Louise.
Yeah, thank you. I don't really need to add much more, and I must thank Ben because he did brief me previously the other week. I think it's excellent that this is going ahead, and I think it's quite important actually that we look at the success or not of this scheme once it's up and running, because it's so important for the future of meeting the LTP4, which the county has had now, and active travel, It's all good for our mental health and well-being. It's got to help with climate change, and I can't sing the praises of such a scheme any higher than that. I think it's really good. I think I supported it last time it came, so no dissent from me. Crack on and approve it, Nick.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Before I do that, though, Russell, would you like to add anything to that?
Oh, just briefly, thanks, Nick. I'm really pleased to see this scheme going improved. Obviously, it's a big cost increase, but that's life. The thing I was going to point out is that I was really pleased to see at paragraph 20, there's going to be some monitoring cameras and count surveys, because I think we'll all be very keen to see what the increase in cycling is once the scheme has been completed. It definitely will lead to an increase because people will find it safer and more convenient to cycle. But whether it's 10% or 15 or 20% will be really interesting, and it will give us, I think, an evidence base for other schemes elsewhere. So that will be really interesting to see.
Yes, definitely. And I think the nice thing for me is that this, although it's what we're looking at here is one project in isolation, it actually, when you look at the entire kind of Transforming Cities Fund plans around Southampton, it really does begin to create a network for those of us that are in the areas that are adjacent to the city, that makes transport to and from the regional hub and also between the neighbouring areas much easier and much more attractive for those who want to use alternative forms of transport to just driving. So that's all a good thing. If there are no other comments, then as Louise has asked me to so nicely, I'm very happy to crack on and do this. The recommendations, I apologise earlier, I've been reminded by Katie that I should be telling you where the recommendations are. So the recommendations are in paragraphs 2 to 5 on page 17 of the agenda. I'm very happy to approve those. And yes, as Louise said, let's crack on with it, Ben, and get everything underway. Well, I should have just said, sorry, the one thing I did mean to say was that we did have quite a conversation ahead of time just to work through the costs of these, because obviously the cost has increased substantially, but it is as a matter of the general inflation there's been in all sorts of construction costs, as we know very well, all of us here that attend these meetings regularly. So thanks very much, Ben and Maisie. Obviously, Tim's got a couple of questions that he'll ask you outside of the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so one final issue for me, which is commuted sums policy guidance, Patrick.
Okay, thank you, Councillor King. Again, this is an update on the development of the new commuted sums policy and approval to implement that with the proposed approach set out in the paper. I think just the point I would make before I hand over to Paul Davison, who's going to take us through the paper, is just that importance of making sure that we recover the cost to maintain our infrastructure and assets long into the future. And what this policy does is really set that out very clearly on the reasons why and how we make sure that we can have sort of sustainable infrastructure going forward. But Paul, could I ask you to take us through the paper, if you would, please?
Of course, yes. Hi, everyone. So yes, for the benefit of people on this call, it's probably worth me just providing a very quick clarification of what commuted sums actually are, and I'll provide a brief overview of the report. So commuted sums are essentially financial contributions made by developers or other third parties to highway authorities, as Patrick says, really as compensation for taking on the future maintenance responsibility of new highways and highway improvements. And these are typically secured through Section 38 or 278 legal agreements. This report provides an update on the development of a new commuted sum policy guidance and commuted sum calculator, and seeks formal approval to implement the proposed approach from July this year. The policy guidance has actually already been given previous exec member approval in principle. That was in principle subject to undertaking a consultation exercise with the relevant stakeholders. So to ensure that we did get the viewpoints from all the relevant stakeholders and make sure they were considered, we invited the local planning authorities, national parks, several national and local developers were invited to comment on the new policy guidance, and then a series of workshops were then held subsequently to discuss that feedback in a little bit more detail. We then reviewed all of that consultation feedback to ensure that the comments and issues that were raised were considered and reflected wherever feasible and appropriate to do so, what they were reflected in the policy guidance. I think in general, I would say that all the stakeholders welcome the new approach's overarching aims, which is to try and really provide a very transparent and consistent method of applying commuted sums. And one of the big bugbears is a slightly kind of convoluted process to actually get highways adopted. So we're hoping that a transparent and clear process will expedite that process. Unsurprisingly, due to all the conflicting kind of and competing demands of all the different stakeholders, a number of issues were raised, or a number of common issues raised and concerns have been summarised in the report, along with the subsequent amendments that we made to address those. So I think we firmly believe that the main issues have been mitigated, and as a direct result of the consultation exercise, we have made quite a few amendments, concessions, and improvements in general to the policy guidance. And I think we now really we believe that it strikes a really good balance between limiting our future maintenance liabilities, securing the necessary levels of funding, but also, you know, going some way to kind of meeting local planning authority and developer requirements. So that was just a quick summary, but hopefully that provides a sufficient overview.
Yep. It does indeed, Paul. Thank you very much. That's very clear indeed. Tim, Louise, any questions or comments from you? Louise?
Is there only one very quick question? I noticed that trees and verges are included, but hedges and hedgerow doesn't seem to be included. And I think the importance of hedgerow going forward for the environment and for providing wildlife corridors, I think it's something that perhaps should be contained within that policy document. So verges and trees are there, but I think it would be good to have hedgerows as well. And I hope you get sufficient money, because whenever developers come, they do all they can to not have to meet the county council's requirement for adoptable standards. And often when money is tight, it's all the things that make a place better that go. So yeah, but I'd like to think that you might consider including hedgerows and getting a sum for that, because that's hugely important.
Okay, just coming in on that, we do in the calculator, which lists quite a few of the materials and assets that we will be collecting or commuted sums for. There is a landscaping, it's under the broad remit of landscaping, but in there we do have trees, grass, there are hedges, there are shrubs. So we do have a list of items such as that we, some of those we subsidise. So for example, trees, with the climate emergency and our policy on trees, we do collect money for trees, but it's heavily subsidised to try and encourage those in adoptions. In new development, should I say, and things like shrubs and hedges, etc., are included in the policy, and we will collect money for those. But if need be going forward, we can subsidise that to try and encourage them if that's a requirement.
Good. Tim, would you like to add anything, or?
Just very briefly, just to get clarity on what happens if these aren't agreed or the roads aren't adopted. We do have problems with roads not being adopted for long periods, particularly bus routes, but not only bus routes elsewhere. How do we intend to handle that? Thank you.
I mean, another of the overarching aims is we do strongly as an authority, we do want to try and encourage the adoption of estate roads. That's the primary sort of aim of ours. Now, we do feel that the new policy guidance actually does go some way to encouraging people to adopt roads. It's very clear, transparent. People can see from a very early stage what is and isn't preferred by the authority, and it kind of hopefully gets rid of lots of snags on that happen at an early stage. If a developer really does not want to pay a commuted sum for a development, it's very difficult for us to force that upon them. We can enter into negotiations, obviously, to see if there are some compromises that can be made. But if a developer really wants to stand firm and say, I don't want this road to be adopted, I want to keep this private, there's very little that we can really do about that. All we can do is have processes and procedures in place to try and prevent that from happening.
Thank you for that. I'm aware of a number that obviously haven't been adopted, that already exist of existing developments, let alone new ones. So I think there is quite a big problem that we perhaps need to address elsewhere. Thank you.
I think if I'm honest, for I know the three of us, in terms of Louise and myself and you, Tim, we're all dual hatters, and part of that, the responsibility actually lies with us, with our district and borough hats on, in terms of encouraging the planning authorities to do that. And but I equally know it's quite challenging. We your colleagues in Test Valley a little while ago put forward a proposal that we should be pushing for all new developments to have adoptable roads, and that in principle that sounds fine, but actually that doesn't always apply, because there are rural developments where you wouldn't necessarily want to have adoptable standards in some of them. So but it is definitely an issue for all of us with new developments that are going on where the roads aren't adopted. And as Paul says, it would be ideal if we could get those in those kind of locations to be adopted, because they otherwise store up all sorts of problems for everybody and for the residents that live in them, as you know well, I'm sure, from your patch and from Louise's and from mine, where there are issues that just continue. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do to control it. And I think that it starts with planning, if I'm honest with you. It starts with us, as all of us sit on planning committees of any form across the piece, to do what we can to try and encourage that to happen.
I would agree with that. And I think just on that point, I think we have been working closely with the planning authorities to try and get their buy-in, and also to make them understand the issues that we're facing, because everyone has their own guidelines, constraints, regulations, and they don't always sort of meet in the middle. So I think what we try to do is have as much flexibility built into the policy as possible, so that we do have that flex, that we can kind of compromise if need be to get things over the line, but still make sure that we do secure the necessary levels of funding to make sure that we can maintain the appropriate standard, which is really key to this, I think.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, thanks. Russell, like to add anything?
Yeah, just following on from that point about flexibility, I would just like to welcome the fact that you've built in some flexibility for our 2 national parks. I think that's quite important, and it shows that you've done a good job, Paul, of consulting with all the key stakeholders and listening to what they've. So I appreciate that, and I welcome the flexibility there.
Yeah.
Super. If there are no other comments, if everyone's happy, then the recommendations for this item are on in paragraphs 2 to 6 on page 25. I'm very happy to agree those, and that's the end of my bit of the decision day. So I will hand over to Russell for your part, Russell.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, I'm Russell Oppenheimer. I'm the executive member for Countryside and Regulatory Services. I've one item to consider which is exempt. So as there are no deputations, we are going to stop the webcast now and move into an exempt session. So I'd like to thank those for attending and observing today before I read the formal exclusion, which is as follows. The public be excluded from the decision day during the following item of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during this item, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, and further that in all of the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemptions outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in the report. So having read that, I would like to ask Katie if we could stop the webcast, please.
No problem. I'll